So the one that has a little claw on it. I guess it's purple. Is it purple? How about that?
It's a royal. Royal something.
Oh, we were going to start 5 minutes. What do you
be at the piano at Goodwin House around the corner from the room in memory care. I am grateful to be surrounded by music as we gather together this morning. We gather here to remember a long and remarkable life, and also a life that at its core was about family and service and love. It was about care for the world, about laughter. It was about a partnership that lasted many years with great joy and commitment. We come together to remember that life, to grieve its passing, and to celebrate all of the gifts that Gene brought, all of the ways that we continue to live his values in our own lives, and all of the ways that his legacy continues. Thank you, babies. We gather together to hold the wholeness of Gene's life, even as we will hear the specific stories that made him who he was. I found a quote from William Ellery Channing, often known as the father of American Unitarianism. And it spoke to me this morning, and I think, especially when I get to the end, you may see why. To live content with small means, to seek elegance rather than luxury, and refinement rather than fashion, to be worthy, not respectable, and wealthy, not rich, to listen to stars and birds, babes and sages with open heart, to study hard, to think quietly, act frankly, talk gently, await occasions, hurry never. In a word, to let the spiritual, unbidden and unconscious grow up through the common. This is my symphony. We have a symphony of a life to remember today, with many movements and different parts and voices along the way. It is an honor to be together. In our Unitarian Universalist tradition, we light a chalice to signal the creation of sacred space, a time set apart. I'd like to invite Leo to come forward and light our chalice this morning. I offer these chalice lighting words. We light this chalice, which transforms wax into pure light and warmth, to remind us of our own living, transforming the stuff of this world into the love and activity of our daily lives. As we remember Gene, may today bring forth transformation in ourselves, from grief, healing, from memory, wholeness, and from celebration, love. I invite you now to sing a response to our shared creation of sacred space. Cindy Charles serves as our song leader this morning, and the choir is here to back you up, so sing perhaps the way Gene would have, with a full-throated voice. The words are in your order of service, and I invite you to rise in body and in spirit to sing together. We will hear this morning stories from Jean's family, stories that will give us a glimpse into who he was as a partner, as a sibling, as a father. We'll hear stories that tell us who Jean was as a friend. Certainly, this church knows a lot of stories of who Jean was in this congregation. Always the best dressed person in the sanctuary, and always here. I want to give you just a little framework of Jean's life so that you have some anchors of the big dates and moments as they went through the wholeness of his life. And then we'll let the colors be painted in, the strains of the symphony. Jean was born in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania in 1926, the first of 5 children. He grew up during the Great Depression in an extended family that was close-knit, a dedication that you can see in Jean and Dorothy's life that continues still. Early on, Jean was involved in intellectual pursuits, as you can imagine, as well as musical ones. He was appointed to the United States Naval Academy in 1944, where he did all the things you would expect: intramural sports, sang in and directed the Glee Club, accompanied the Catholic chorus, and graduated 3rd in his class in 1947. Jean went on to receive a commission and to serve in the Navy, as well as serving during that time in Washington, D.C., attending the Russian language school, a thread that would continue through his naval career as he taught Russian to students in Annapolis. Jean had dreamed of entering the Foreign Service, but the Korean War changed the course of that hope, and instead he was recalled in 1951 to serve there. During his time at the Russian language school, he met Dorothy, then Dorothy Cochran, a journalist, and who had recently moved from Kansas. Jean and Dorothy married in 1952. You'll note that that was just after he was recalled to serve in the Korean War. They married at the Navy Chapel in Washington and moved to Norfolk, Virginia. In the years that followed, they welcomed their first child in 1956, and then more children in 1960, 1961, and 1964. Every conversation I ever had with Jean included conversation about his family, about his children, his grandchildren, and his great-grandchildren. They were in so many ways the core of his life. During that time, they purchased a home in Alexandria, Virginia, where they raised their family and spent 60 years, and also joined this congregation, then the Unitarian Church of Arlington, in large part because of the church's commitment to civil rights and other social justice work. They continued and grew that commitment in their activities here at the church, as well as being strong institutionalists, learning the history of the congregation, in Dorothy's case, writing it, and building over time care and stewardship of this church. In 1962, Jean's life had a significant turning point as he experienced a nervous breakdown after the Korean War and the Cuban Missile Crisis after weeks of stressful work. He was honorably discharged from the Navy and began a career in financial management, which had been recommended to him by a relative some years prior. Jean went on to great success in that work. In 1989, the Washington Post described him as one of the top 1% of bond managers in the country. And I will say that for many years, part of Jean's stewardship of many people's finances included deep and caring stewardship of this church's finances, as he made sure that our future was secure in his care. Gene, as you will hear, continued his commitment to social justice. He and Dorothy had lives of service and generosity. And I think every time I speak to one of his children, I hear of another way that that was lived out, through Meals on Wheels, through work in this congregation, work in Arlington. Gene also continued his love of music. I think it's clear that that was extended through the family pretty well. And indeed, throughout the community of Arlington, as Gene supported the high school music program and other community choruses and orchestras. Gene and Dorothy traveled widely, took their family with them to see parts of the world, and continued their care for that world and their concern for it. Just before the pandemic, Gene and Dorothy moved into Goodwin House, and I think all of us were able to see the dedication and care that Gene gave to Dorothy in the final years of her life. I will note that at 96, Gene won a gold medal and set the record for his age group in the 50-meter freestyle swimming event at the Northern Virginia Senior Olympics. I remember that photograph, and it was a joyful moment. Gene never stopped his engagement with the world, his pursuit of his own joy and happiness and others. I look forward to the stories that we will hear this morning as we learn more about his remarkable life. And to begin, I invite Robert Mulligan to come forward and share. Yeah, right up here.
Gene was one of 5 children, and as such, my brother for 91 years. And my earliest memory is that he was my piano teacher when I was about 7 or 8. The growing up years were interrupted by Annapolis and the U.S. Navy, World War II. And we didn't really connect until, I would say, the mid-60s, when we were into wives and families and enjoyed many reunions. And I think my best memory and legacy for my brother is he was the driving force in acquiring the Glen Summit property along with Mary Lou. And it's really developed as a family center, and I think the legacy is that first cousins are much more like sisters and brothers, and that's the best legacy I think he could have left. And I will miss him because I don't get to talk to him anymore.
Good morning, everyone. It's not unusual for me to leave a memorial service or a funeral feeling like I've gotten to know someone better than I knew them in their life. While this isn't totally true for me in Dad's case, still, the condolence cards and emails we've received from so many people kind of blew me away. They speak to the breadth of his interests and talents, and especially to his remarkable connections to so many different folks who knew him through many phases and aspects of his life. I'll just mention a few of the comments here. There was one card from the colleagues at the Piano at Peabody week-long musical course that occurs every summer in Baltimore. The sentiments expressed from fellow participants celebrated Dad's love of music and of being together with like-minded music lovers. One inscription describes him as, quote, a wonderful musician and a fine gentleman. Many of the cards I received were from friends who live at Goodwin House and or who attend church here. This isn't surprising, as our parents' connections with many of you were very strong for the last many decades. Some of the comments were, he was such a beacon at UUCA, inspiring us by his unwavering dedication and the depth of his commitment. A wonderful human being who loved his principles, and the world is a better place because he shared his life and talents with so many. Astonished by his vitality and a pillar of UUCA. Dad and Mom passed their love of music on to us, and they reinforced it through their support of our musical and creative careers and endeavors. 3 out of the 4 of us became professional musicians and music educators. What happened, Mark? Well, I guess architecture is a creative field also. One of my earliest memories is of Dad playing Bach preludes and fugues on the piano, which he did religiously. I attribute much of my own musical interest and enjoyment to hearing him play Bach and to all the other music in our house I heard as a child. Our childhoods included hundreds of lessons, of course, but also dozens of musicales at our home, for which fellow students came to play Mozart string quartets and other pieces for various ensembles. Dad often joined in, sometimes as a conductor, not that we really needed that in chamber music, but also as a pianist. Music made him happy. As Reverend Amanda said, Dad believed in helping others, and he spent much of his life in service to various charities, to institutions such as this church, and to individuals. 2 of his favorite causes were supporting people who had been incarcerated, and working to provide affordable housing for lower income people. Dad's awareness of folks who had less going for them in life was remarkable, and he often acted on his feelings for them. He volunteered for Alive, an Alexandria organization devoted to helping folks struggling with food insecurity and economic disparity. He occasionally put a $100 bill into the meals he delivered for Alive. Imagine finding that in a charitable food delivery. Dad's and Mom's willingness to help others extended to my siblings and me, as well as to their grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Whether the financial needs were for medical, educational, musical, or travel expenses, we could count on them for help. I love Dad's idea, which encouraged our own responsibility, that it was almost always best to help with a portion of the expense rather than to pay for it fully. And they never made me feel that you owe us for this gift. They truly enjoyed sharing their resources with us and with many others. We're very grateful for the excellent care Mom and Dad received at Goodwin House Bailey's Crossroads in their final years. The amazing staff never said an unkind word in my presence in 5 years of visits to Dad and Mom there. We're especially grateful to the hospice personnel and for the staff, nurses, and doctors of the healthcare center where Mom and Dad spent their final months. As you all probably know, there was generally a certain formality to my dad's interactions, but he was very well-spoken and a good communicator. Eventually, in Dad's last months, he had a hard time expressing himself clearly. Yet one occasion really stands out to me. To some degree, I think it sums up what he cared about most in the end, making sure our family was well taken care of. With a sudden clarity at the end of a visit during which there had been very little conversation, he asked me, "Will the family be able to stay together?" I answered that Laura, Mark, Kathy, and I texted each other daily and Zoomed together frequently, so yes. And then, after a moment of considering that, he looked right at me and said, What about the money? Thankfully, he had entrusted me in his last years to look after his resources and help deploy them once he could no longer do that. I smiled and told him, "Everything is fine. There is enough. We are all fine."
It's time to hear from the viola section. Good morning, and thank you everyone for being here for our Father's Memorial. Of course, today's memorial includes several of Dad's favorite pieces you've heard already by Mozart, Brahms, Handel, and the Bach air that we just performed was something that he had specifically requested for to be performed at this occasion. This is music that we grew up hearing over the decades, and it's music that will continue to live with us all our lives.
Dad's love of classical music is well known, but it was his persistent dedication to learning, practice, and performance that really stood out. With his daily practice regimen, he modeled for his children and grandchildren the habits of lifelong learning. He was not only an appreciative listener as we all began learning piano and string instruments, but also frequently our accompanist. Dad was already, and mostly at his initiative, Dad was already in his 80s when he started taking piano lessons again. He participated in the Peabody summer program many years in a row, as mentioned, and he celebrated his 95th birthday 3 years ago by giving a recital on this very stage.
Yeah, Dad had a particular affinity, probably you all know, for the music of Bach and Handel. That was the focus of his earliest lessons on piano, and these were also the pieces he enjoyed practicing and performing regularly, even through the final years of life. He dedicated himself not only to mastering the technical challenges, which are substantial, but also on discovering and then learning to express sort of the mathematical precision of Bach and of course the harmonic logics. I think those were deep for him, and he learned and enjoyed improvising his own melodic passages based on those familiar Baroque chord progressions, and always, or shall I say, usually, leading to a satisfying harmonic resolution. I think that Dad's improvisations were a form of left brain, right brain exercise that he almost invented for himself. They were one of the ways that he sought order in the universe.
Everyone who knew Dad, our dad, could sense that about him, that he loved structure, order, and balance. He believed in the laws of science. He was curious, and he looked for rational explanations. He took an open-minded and experimental approach to nearly every situation, whether it was managing his clients' investments or debating political and social issues of the day. He gathered information and evidence before offering an opinion.
He read widely and was always eager to recommend and discuss the latest books on current events, economics, and environmentalism. Dad had the heart and habits of an activist, and his commitment to social justice, environmental sustainability, climate resilience, human rights, fairness, and so on only deepened over time.
He and Mom began attending the Unitarian Church at the start of the civil rights era, attracted to the church's commitment to social justice and progressive ideals. They found a welcoming community among the members of this congregation and were active participants for more than 60 years. My mom especially loved being the pencil brigade person here. Whenever they visited me in Hawaii, we attended UU gatherings in Hilo and Puna.
You know, we know that Dad enjoyed a rich intellectual life, but physical activity was also equally important to him. It's one of the reasons we believe that he lived so long. He loved taking daily walks and weekday swims at Chinkapin Park. He encouraged all us kids to be active, whether it was clowning around with gymnastics at home when we were kids, swimming, dancing, going on nature hikes. These are things we learned to love. As we grew into adulthood, he continued encouraging us. What kind of exercise are you getting these days was usually the first question he would ask at a family gathering. And if you were just getting over an illness, he'd suggest that maybe a short walk might help.
Even on vacation, Dad could not sit still. He and Mom visited my family in Hawaii annually for at least 2 decades. And during each visit, they contributed to making our lives better. I was always amazed by Dad's energy level, despite the challenges of those long flights. He helped spread cinder for our first driveway. He helped plant trees in our yard, helped dig a hole for our mailbox, flew paper airplanes with Alden, played with Elizabeth and Alden, and we all went out on hikes and other adventures together, swimming mostly.
And Dad took his role as pater familias very seriously. I'm sure that message is coming across today. He wanted to be a good role model, and he was very generous with his fatherly wisdom.
He had a standard speech ready for me at the end of every summer as I prepared to drive back to college, a 6-hour drive from Alexandria up to New York. He would always conclude his list of safety recommendations by saying, "Remember, if you get lost, just take the next exit."
Those were not empty words for him. Dad demonstrated his commitment to living his credo by getting lost on nearly every road trip we went on. Repeatedly missing turns, not following our advice, getting lost, and then eventually taking the next exit. Yeah, this was even true driving up to Glen Summit, which we did every year.
To be fair, the highways have changed a bit since Dad started making the drive up to Glen Summit back in the 1940s.
Our ancestral vacation home in Glen Summit, Pennsylvania, served as a gathering place Uncle Bob mentioned for the extended Mulligan family for more than a century. And it was thanks to him and his siblings, Aunt Lou, Aunt Joan, Uncle Bill, and Uncle Bob, the Fantastic Five, that we were able to keep the home and the family for so long and to develop the lifelong bonds we have with our aunts, uncles, cousins, second cousins, in-laws, and outlaws. Dad cherished these family vacations, these family gatherings, the shared meals, the family tennis tournament, the evening musical recital, of course, and visits to the lake. And we're very, very grateful that he was able to enjoy one last Labor Day reunion in 2023 in relatively good health.
Dad was so excited about that reunion. In fact, afterwards, as Sunder, Alden, Elizabeth, and I drove him back to Goodwin House, he suddenly said, "Let's do it again next month." We couldn't promise him that, but we did remind him that we'd be spending more time with him in Virginia. Some months later, I remember a Zoom call Greg facilitated with Dad, where he told us how important it was to him that he had been a good role model for all of us, that he hoped he'd be remembered for his good behavior. It was the first time I had heard him speak about this kind of lifelong wish. It's funny how there are moments like this when things that should have been obvious all along becomes so clear. Of course, he was a wonderful father and an excellent role model for us.
He was, and we'll miss him a lot.
We were so fortunate to have Mom and Dad with us as long as we did. That they enjoyed robust health and vitality for the majority of their combined 195 years on this earth is even more reason for gratitude. Thank you all for being here today to celebrate all that Gene Mulligan was, individually and together with our mom, and all that he contributed to this community and beyond. What a challenge it has been to try to encapsulate who Dad was and what he meant to us in a 5-minute reflection. But I'll start with this. The day after Dad died, in my grief and at a loss for words, I just shared one of my favorite photos of Dad on Facebook. He was smiling joyfully as we danced at his granddaughter's wedding. And I thought of all the titles that Dad had earned over his lifetime. Pianist, valedictorian, naval intelligence officer, Russian language instructor, lieutenant commander, investment banker, executive vice president of ASB Capital Management, certified financial analyst, and all-around stock market whiz. Arlington Unitarian Church lay leader, treasurer, chair, philanthropist. A voracious reader and world traveler, an ardent volunteer and fighter for humanitarian causes. And, as mentioned earlier, at age 96, he won a new title. He was a gold medal swimmer. He was actually the first person in that age category to ever compete in that event at the Northern Virginia Olympics. But he earned that gold medal, and he wore it all around Goodwin House for quite a while. For many years, I wished that when it came time for our parents to leave their beloved Alexandria home, that they would move to Charlottesville so I could help care for them. I lobbied them for years with the following enticements. They would have 2 generations of family around them, with the possibility, now realized, of a third. Charlottesville has a vibrant academic and cultural scene, what with the University of Virginia. They could join the Charlottesville Unitarian Church, which would undoubtedly benefit from their energy and expertise. And most importantly, Dad could play the family Steinway anytime he wanted to. I thought I made a pretty good case for the move. Heck, I even promised to drive him to Arlington every Sunday so he could continue to be a member of this church. And I was going to do it. Dad and Mom seriously entertained my idea, but eventually the love of this church, this community, and the proximity to Capitol Hill so Dad could continue to lobby for his causes that are close to his heart, kept them in Northern Virginia. They moved to Goodwin House, Bailey's Crossroads in 2019, where they were well loved and well cared for during the last years of their life. Clearing out Mom and Dad's beloved Alexandria home of 60 years in preparation for their move was like unearthing a time capsule. Mom and Dad saved everything, not only their own letters, journals, scrapbooks, photos, school records, and music, but also those of their children, their parents, their grandparents, friends. Anything that had ever come into that house stayed in that house. I was continually struck, though, by the richness of both parents' lives, by these artifacts that reflected their intelligence, their curiosity, their unbelievable productivity, their sense of purpose, their adventuresome spirit, and their deep love for their enormous circle of family and friends. One of my favorite discoveries during excavation at 1104 Trinity Drive was a giant stash of flowery, heartfelt love letters between Mom and Dad during Dad's time in the Navy. There is no doubt that their love, connection, and mutual admiration ran as deep as the ocean from which Dad penned those letters. Another favorite find is Dad's 1944 Kingston High School yearbook, in which I learned that he was not only first in his class, he was also voted most distinguished and most likely to succeed. I learned that Dad had the highest academic record of anyone who had ever attended Kingston High School to date. Did you know our dad also played bass in the student orchestra? He ran track, and he acted in the senior play. He did all of those things, and the photo proof is next door on the table. Please take a look at the Kingston High School yearbook when you go over there. It's amazing. So for a different reason other than I had initially anticipated, I did make those promised Sunday drives to Northern Virginia every week I possibly could for the past 5 years. Caring for both parents, albeit long distance, in their last several years of life was undeniably one of the greatest honors and joys of my life. Our roles changed, but my parents' loving presence, encouragement, and appreciation never did. Even when weakened by COVID, pneumonia, and dementia, look of joy on my dad's face when I arrived never diminished. If anything, it intensified. And until the last few days of his life, as we said goodbye, Dad always asked me to call as soon as I arrived back home to make sure I had arrived safely. Dad had so many roles in his life: dad, grandpa, devoted husband, son, brother, cousin, uncle, friend, great-grandpa, Gene, patriarch of the most wonderful family for which anyone could ever wish. How fortunate we all were to have him in our lives as long as we did. And I'd like to close with our Mulligan family grace. May we have eyes that see, hearts that love, and hands that are ready to serve.
I was in high school or college. Grandpa and I were taking a walk somewhere near the King Street station. I was walking closer to the road. He was further away. He had us switch places. He explained it was so that the smaller number of expected life years would be in danger. That was Grandpa. He didn't always express himself the same way that other people did, but you always knew he cared.
It's easy to remember Grandpa as a very serious and single-minded person. We've heard about how he was always the best dressed in the room, and he even wore a suit on Christmas morning when everybody else was in pajamas. But I'd like to share a more lighthearted memory. I was at Rehoboth Beach in Delaware this past week, and it brought back memories of when I was little, and he and my dad taught me how to body surf, how to ride the waves. Grandpa loved being at the ocean, of course, and he was really good at catching waves, but every once in a while, a wave would knock him down, and he'd get back up smiling and laughing and just head right back in. He just absolutely loved to swim. We've heard about his gold medal, although if he was the first one, then I wonder if there was anybody else in the pool competing. Still gold. Still gold. The loss of Grandpa feels like the end of an era. When I was little, I saw him and Grandma Dorothy as the central pillars of our whole family life. It's funny to think that if Grandpa had continued the old patriarchal tradition, my dad would be Eugene Worth Mulligan IV, and Eric would be the fifth. I know we associate Grandpa with noble causes like charity and justice and legacy, but I think a lot of this determination was simply to live a well-balanced life full of music and family and sport and kindness. And I share those values, and I feel very lucky to be his grandson.
Never wake a sleeping baby. This is his granddaughter, Indy. My grandfather, who he called G-Pa, gave me and all of his other progeny one of the greatest gifts, the gift of music. Not as a hobby, but as music as a value. He taught by example that participating in and appreciating music is simply a part of life. It's just a thing you do, like eating or sleeping. This value has undoubtedly shaped the lives of every one of his descendants, whether they enjoy music during personal time or have made it a part of their career. To me, music is a medium through which to connect with others. Personally, music has been at the core of many of my favorite family memories, led to meeting my husband and starting my family, and helped me build and foster relationships with hundreds of students. Thank you, G-Pa, for giving us all access to the endless opportunities that music provides.
Greg, you said that at memorial services you often learn something new about the person that you are coming to remember. I hope that each of us has heard a part of Gene's life that we knew already, a reminder of who we knew him to be, and also perhaps something new to learn. I will be reflecting on Gene in a suit on Christmas morning. The family has asked me to open the circle now. Having shared their memories, lit their candles, played their music, they invite your stories as well. If you would like to come forward and share, I invite you to share a story, not perhaps the totality of your experience with Gene. A story, a strain to continue building the symphony of his life. Would you like to come forward?
I'm Sunder, Kathy's husband. he always, when he came over, he always wanted to help us out. I remember, I'm sorry. I remember one day I was changing a tire on my mining lawnmower and I couldn't get it off. And he came over and said, "Here, let me help." And he took over. He took it off. He changed the whole thing and put the new one on. And he said, "There." And he accepted me into the family. He treated me like a son. And he was a father to me. My father died when I was 7, and I really appreciate having Gene. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Andrea Bailey, and Gene Mulligan hired me in 1993 as an investment associate to work at ASB Capital Management. And a year later, something really devastating happened to me. My husband decided that he wanted something different. And so we had a viewer, he was in the military at the time, Air Force. And so I waited before I told anyone that I was losing my home. And about 3 months, I received a foreclosure notice in the mail from the courthouse. And I was at my desk, and I'm crying, and Angela Madison, my coworker, came over to me. And I explained to her what had happened. And she decided, I'm gonna go tell Gene. And I'm looking at Angie. I said, "Aunt, I'm telling Gene." And so she went over and she told him. 2 minutes later, Gene Mulligan came over to me. "Andrea, can I see you for a moment?" And I'm like, okay, what is he going to say? I walked in his office, and on his desk was his checkbook. And he simply said 5 words to me: "How much do you need?" And wrote the check. And from that act of kindness, I have paid it forward every day of my life. I have thanked God every day for the journey, for my journey, and the journey that led me to Gene Mulligan. Because with that one act of kindness, I had 2 boys at the time, 7 and 3. I was able to stay in my home, where I'm still, to this day, I am still there. My kids grew up in a very nice neighborhood. They had their own beds, and we had vacations every year. There is no thanks to Eugene Mulligan that I can say, or there's nothing. But to his family, thank you. Thank you, and I thank God for letting him cross my path in that one short, just a few years I worked with him. And like I said, I paid for it every day. Sometimes it's detrimental to my health, I don't care. Someone helped me, so I am helping someone else, no matter how difficult or how hard it is, from that one act of kindness. Thank you so much.
My name is Jeff Robbins, and I'm a member of the Goodwin House, Bailey's Crossroads, and also a member of the UU Church. And I moved into Goodwin House 2 years ago, and I just want the family to know how much I've appreciated Gene as he's my hero. I play the piano, but not to the extent that Gene did, or even to the music that Gene did. But he and I would run into each other frequently because I didn't have a piano, and he would end up playing, and I would either be there when he would want to come practice, or I would be there, come in when he was playing. And he always gave me a kind remark, even though I could tell that what I was playing really wasn't what Gene would be playing after I left. But I wanted to share with the family, in the spring of this year, I was playing out in the rotunda, the piano, and Gene's aide brought him down and sat him right next to the piano as she always did. And as I was playing, I was trying to find a way to reach out to Gene, just to let him know that, kind of get through, because by that time he was very quiet and didn't say a lot or whatever. And so I was going through a number of songs, and I started playing Spirit of Life. And Gene grabbed my arm and gave it a squeeze. And I turned to Gene as I was playing, and I said, "Gene, the choir loves you." And he gave me a big squeeze at that time. And it was the last time that I met Gene. Thank you so much for sharing, Gene, and all your talents. It's just remarkable what a tremendous person he was, but what a tremendous family you all are.
My name is Diane Mulligan. I'm married into this bunch of amazing people called the Mulligans. 23 years ago, we had a wedding that was interrupted by 9/11. So much of the Mulligan family couldn't come. And the bar bill was much slower, by the way. But 5 years later, many of the Mulligan family came to Carbondale, Colorado, just in the center of Colorado, and one of those people was Uncle Gene. And my fondest memories are Uncle Gene, his sister, and his other sister hiking to the Maroon Bells, and then taking Uncle Gene to the Aspen Music Festival, a place where many of his family has been and participated, sitting on the grass, lying down with his white hair, eating grapes and drinking wine, and listening to some amazing classical music. I really love Uncle Gene. I love this whole Mulligan family. And not only is your family staying together, Eugene Worth Mulligan, the whole Mulligan family is staying together.
Hello, my name is Bill Fogarty. I've been a member of the church and served in numerous committees and boards with Gene. I just want to say that he indeed was a role model, amazing role model. I also like to share, I'm kind of an unofficial archivist here at the church, and Gene left me a box about a year ago. And I just want to share with you a couple of the things that were in his box. One was a hymnal with numbers of his favorite hymns, obviously. And Jeff, I would say 123, Spirit of Life, is dog-eared in that. And also a book here, What If the World Went Humanist? Gene was a great member of the humanist group here at the church. You know, he and Dorothy would come, to every meeting every other week. And also in the box, I found one sermon from Reverend Michael McGee called God Talk. So obviously, his intellectual curiosity was tremendous, and he really shared that with all of us here at the church. So thank you for sharing your father with us.
I'm Tom Burke. I was a third cousin of Jean. More so, I have been a friend of Jean and the Mulligan family for many, many decades. My roots go back to Wyoming Valley, where I have lived for all 77 of my years, and where the Mulligan family got its start in the great city of Wilkes-Barre, the borough of Kingston, and the great village of Glen Summit. And I would say a few things categorically, that I am a better person for having known Jean Mulligan. The world is a better place for Jean and Dorothy Mulligan having lived their lives. Their wonderful offspring, who perform so admirably here today, represent a legacy that words can't begin to describe. I am so happy that there has been some streaming and video taping of today's ceremony. I would share that it's apropos that this service should take place during the Olympics, because if Jean Mulligan was not the embodiment of a strong mind and a strong body, I don't know who might be. And as a man of principle, he was exemplary. He was true to his beliefs, his convictions, and that is something that is sorely needed in the challenging circumstances in which we now find ourselves in society, both in the United States and globally. I would say, too, that his prowess went beyond swimming, his athletic prowess, that is, insofar as I have a dear friend, a former colleague of mine, who resides in Glen Summit year-round, and he would share with me each and every week after Memorial Day what Jean had accomplished on the tennis courts, and that he was competing, as he did with the swimming, in doubles tennis in his early to middle 90s, and somewhat successfully. And he was greatly saddened after Memorial Day of 2023, as I recall. This is after Dorothy had passed the previous year, but he made it to Glen Summit, and he was not quite up to getting out on the court, but there he was, dressed ever dapper with a beautiful woolen sweater and looking out over as if he was the King of England looking over Wimbledon. So did he ever have an impact on people? We're reminded that the lives we live, the principles we uphold, we impact on the lives of everyone we encounter. And we've been so lucky to have had Jean in our lives. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name's Chris Kirsten. I met Jean 40 years ago. I had a professional relationship with him. I was working at Citibank. And I also had the pleasure of speaking to him every morning at 7:30. And my job was to spew off 20 numbers in a particular order, and then to hang up the phone. And Jean was very particular. It was the yen-dollar spread, it's the twos to tens, the this and that. Occasionally I'd be able to sneak in an idea and say, Jean, think about this trade. Well, over the months and years, we became good friends in that he would share some of his views and some of his current thoughts politically, social justice-wise, and what have you. And in the end, he would give me more and more business. No one had ever heard of ASB Capital Management at Citibank at the time. So I stumbled into this incredible thing. He left these huge orders, which we put through the desk, and soon enough, he was called Jean the Machine. So not only was he a very good performer, he had high conviction around his ideas, but he was a leader, because everybody on the floor at Citibank, which is a huge place, said, what's Jean the Machine thinking today? So in large part, I came from afar today to honor him. It's great seeing the family here. So many of you remind me of him, trait-wise, and I just want to thank him for launching my career.
What beautiful stories to help fill in this remarkable life, stories of generosity and care and connection. I'm grateful for everyone sharing those. And I remind you that this is only the beginning of sharing those stories of Jean's life. I hope that you'll join us in the reception afterward as the family invites you into the Reeb Center, and that you will continue to share the stories of Jean's life and the way that you live out those values yourself. I invite you now to rise in body or in spirit and join in hymn 354. We are singing just verses 1 and 4. Thank you so much to Cindy and Barbara on the piano, and to the choir who on their own reached out to me to ask whether the Mulligan family might let them sing. We are grateful for your presence, as we are grateful to be together. Leo, will you come forward to extinguish the chalice, which will require a mighty breath as I share these words. We extinguish the chalice, but not the light of understanding, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry with us as we carry memory, as we carry love. For our closing words, I offer from the family the grace that Laura shared during her remarks. May they be a benediction for all of us, a charge, as Jean would have it, a way of living. May we have eyes that see, hearts that love, and hands that are ready to serve. May it be so.